Folks in Dry River like to say some sunsets here carry the soul of the past. And that evening, when Jack Mercer rode back into town after 10 long years, the sky burned red like it was on fire. He had left Dry River wearing a soldier's coat and carrying the hope that he'd be back within a season. But the war stretched on, the roads home were cut off, and one mistaken telegram convinced the whole world that Jack Mercer was dead. 10 years is too long for any woman to wait, and long enough for a small desert town to learn how to forget. When Jack stepped off his horse, his boots pressed into the fine yellow dust unique to the Arizona desert. Everything looked the same. The saloon, the church, the smithy, even the dry riverbed that gave the town its name. Yet nothing felt familiar anymore. The faces he once knew only stared at him with hesitation, like they were looking at a ghost. He stopped in front of the church and took off his hat, gazing up at the wooden cross. The old priest, Father Collins, was the first to recognize him. "Good Lord. Mercer, you're alive," he whispered. Jack gave a tired smile. "I'm not sure I believe it myself, Father, but it seems that way." The priest looked at him longer than a man usually should, then sighed. "There's something you need to know." Jack didn't answer. He didn't have to, because the moment the church bell rang, he saw her. Nora Lane, the woman who used to be his wife, the woman who once promised she'd wait. She was walking with a young boy, holding his hand, and beside her was another man. Nora froze the second she saw Jack. Her hand tightened on the child's shoulder, her lips parted, and for a moment she looked like she had forgotten how to breathe. Jack walked toward her slowly, sunlight catching the worn lines on his face, the same eyes she once knew so well. "Nora," he said, voice rough from wind and years. "Is that really you?" She stepped back, her voice breaking. "No, Jack, it can't be. It's me." A laugh slipped out of her, brittle and aching. Tears gathered in her eyes. "You died, Jack. I buried you 10 years ago." Jack looked at her, letting the pain and relief mix like dust and sunlight. He gave a small, uneven smile. "Then I guess you buried the wrong man." No one spoke. The wind swept through the churchyard, carrying the echo of the bell. The man beside her, Evan Hart, stepped forward, placing himself between Jack and his family. He wasn't hostile, just cautious. "If you're really Jack Mercer, then you've come back too late." Jack nodded. "Maybe so, but sometimes a man has to die once before he realizes who he wants to live for." Dry River talked about it for days. Jack Mercer's back. Didn't he die? What's Nora supposed to do now? Rumors blew through the streets like desert sand. Jack rented a small house near the dry riverbed. At night, he listened to the wind moan through the cracked earth, remembering the days he and Nora would sit beside the water, back when the river still ran and love still felt young and unbreakable. One night, Father Collins visited. He set an old, yellowed telegram on Jack's table. "This is what killed you, son. A clerical mistake. It said J. Mercer KIA, but the man who died that day was J. Mercer. I knew, but when the town held your funeral, I didn't have the heart to undo their grief." Jack let out a short, broken laugh. One letter off, and an entire life changes. The priest looked at him, eyes soft. "Are you going to see her again?" Jack stared out the window at the moonlit riverbed. "Not to take anything back. I just want to apologize for making her mourn the wrong man." The next day, Nora came. She arrived alone, in a simple dress, holding a bundle of dried flowers. She stood in the doorway, eyes full of confusion, relief, and something she had no name for. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "I truly believed you were gone. I tried to forget, Jack. I tried so hard. I know. And you know I married Evan. I know. Then why are you still here? Because I'm still alive. She gave a sad, trembling smile, tears falling silently. You shouldn't have come back. I agree, Jack said softly. But a person doesn't get to choose the thing that keeps him alive. She looked at him for a long time, then turned away. As she stepped off the porch, the wind swept through the dry riverbed, rustling the cracked earth as if someone were flipping open an old chapter they thought they'd forgotten. In the days that followed, Dry River seemed to breathe old memories back to life. Everyone had heard the story about the man who died and came home, and like any small western town, gossip traveled faster than the wind. Jack Mercer became the subject of every coffee cup conversation, whispered about in the smithy, mentioned in the saloon, even murmured inside the church pews. Some pitied him, some admired him, and a few said, "The Lord returned him to us, but there's no place left here for him to stay." Jack stayed quiet through all of it. He lived in a small wooden cabin beside the dry riverbed. The day he left, that river still carried water. Now it was nothing but a cracked ribbon of earth winding through the valley, a long scar carved by time. Most afternoons he walked down to its edge, sat on a sun-warmed rock, and watched dust swirl across the ground. The insects buzzed like faint echoes from a life he once lived. One morning, a knock came at the door. Father Collins stood there again, holding a worn envelope tied with an old hemp string. "Jack, I found this in the post office archives. I think it belongs to you." Jack opened it. Inside was a faded copy of the telegram sent to Dry River in 1879. J. Mercer, KIA, 5th Infantry, Battle of Rio Mesa. In the back was another slip of paper, clearly written in a rush. "The correction, casualty, J. Messer, not J. Mercer, report amended." Jack stared at the shaky handwriting, then let out a breath that sounded like a laugh. One misplaced letter, a single S, and an entire life had broken apart. 10 years because of one letter, he said softly. Father Collins lowered his head. "I'm sorry, Jack. By the time the correction came through, everything had moved on. Nora remarried, the town held your funeral, and I didn't have the courage to tear her world apart again. I feared destroying the life she had barely pieced back together." Jack said nothing for a long while. His rough fingers traced the faded ink. "I'm not angry, Father. If anyone's to blame, it's the war." Father Collins looked at him, his eyes glistening. "What will you do now, son?" Jack glanced toward the window, where sunlight stretched across the empty riverbed. "I don't know, but I'm still alive, and that alone feels like enough to be grateful for." That afternoon, Nora came to the church. She stepped inside while the old priest was clearing the altar. "Father, how long have you known he was alive?" she asked, voice trembling. Father Collins paused, his shoulders sinking. "Long enough to regret it." Tears filled her eyes. "Do you know how many candles I lit for him? How many nights I prayed for peace after I watched them bring home a body I believed was his? I buried a stranger, Father, and I mourned until I had nothing left. I know. What am I supposed to do with the life I built after that?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said quietly, "You don't have to do anything. The Lord kept him alive so you could know that you once loved the right man, even if it was the wrong time." A few days later, Nora found her way to Jack's cabin. He was tending the fire, and the smell of fresh coffee drifted through the room. Neither spoke at first. Only the crackling of burning wood broke the silence. She finally whispered, "Father Collins told me about the telegram, about the mistake." "Yes, 10 years, Jack. 10 years I believed you were dead. I tried to live again. I tried to smile. I tried to teach the school children your handwriting because it was the last part of you I could hold on to. I know. And you know I married Evan. I know. Then why are you still here? Because I'm still alive. She gave a sad smile, tears slipping silently. You shouldn't have come back. He nodded. I agree, but we don't get to choose the thing that keeps us breathing. She turned toward the window, staring out at the glowing evening sky. You once told me to stand by the river if I ever missed you. You said you'd hear it. I remember. It's been 10 years. The river's dry. What do you hear now? Jack gave a small, tired smile. I still hear the water, Nora. It just flows somewhere else. She looked at him, her eyes wet and her smile trembling. You still say things that make it impossible to know whether I should laugh or cry, because I was never good at anything else. Later that night, after she left, Jack sat by the window for a long time. The moonlight washed over the empty river. In that silver glow, he saw not water, but pieces of memory. The night they held hands under the moon. The morning he rode off to war. The letters that never reached her. He whispered to himself, maybe a river doesn't need water to flow. Maybe it runs on the things we can't forget. The next morning, Jack found an envelope placed carefully at his doorstep. No name on it, only her handwriting. I'll be at the church on Sunday morning. If you have anything left to say, come. But don't come out of guilt. Come only if you still love me. Jack held the letter for a long time. Then he folded it, slipped it into his coat, and whispered, 10 years, Nora. And I still haven't learned how to love anyone else. Summer came early to Dry River that year. Heat shimmered across the dusty road leading into town, and the dry riverbed split open with new cracks, deeper than before. Yet something else drifted in too. Something warmer, like the faint hope of people who had been lonely far too long. Jack Mercer began working at Evan Hart's blacksmith shop. It was Evan who made the offer. You used to work with iron, didn't you? I could use the help. I'm not sure you want me nearby, Jack said quietly. This town may be small, but a man's heart can be bigger if he's willing to try. Jack held his gaze longer than a simple glance required, then nodded. All right. Every morning after that, the two men worked side by side in the dry Arizona heat. The ring of hammer-striking metal echoed through the valley, carried on the same wind that swept across the empty riverbed. They spoke little, but the silence between them no longer felt heavy. Nora continued teaching in the same little schoolhouse on the south side of town. Some evenings, after the children had gone home, she would pause at the window and look toward the small cabin where Jack lived. She didn't know why she looked. She didn't know what she hoped to see. But whenever she spotted a thin line of smoke curling from his chimney, her heartbeat settled. As if somehow, no matter how tangled life had become, some things could still be repaired with patience. A few weeks later, Father Collins called for a prayer service for rain. The drought had lasted 2 seasons, and Dry River was beginning to starve. The entire town gathered in front of the church, and for the first time in years, Jack and Nora stood only a few feet apart in the same crowd. Evan stood across from them, his eyes steady. As the hymn rose into the orange glow of dusk, sunlight washed over the three of them. People who had once been bound together, then torn apart, now quietly hoping for the same thing, rain and forgiveness. After the service ended, Nora stayed to straighten the altar. Jack approached, setting a candle down gently. I didn't come because of guilt, he said. I know. I came because I'm still here, and I don't want to pretend otherwise. She studied him, long and searching. For 10 years, I learned how to bury the past, and now you're asking me to dig it back up? No, I'm only asking you to remember that it never really disappeared." His voice was low, almost broken, but steady enough to make her tremble. She turned away, steadying herself. Evan knows, Jack. I figured. He isn't angry, just sad, because he knows a part of me never left that river. He's a good man. Yes, and that makes everything harder. The next afternoon, Evan sought Jack out. Not at the forge, but at the riverbed. The sun beat down hard as the two men stood apart, the air humming between them. "I know you didn't come back to ruin anything," Evan said first. "I came to understand who I am now," Jack replied. "I was once the man who came after someone else. I know how it feels. It isn't jealousy, it's fear. Fear that you're not the last person she'll remember." Jack looked at the fractured earth where water once ran. "I'm not here to make her choose. I just want her to breathe easy." Evan let out a small, tired laugh. "Strange. That's exactly what I want too." They stood in silence for a while. The wind carried the smell of hot dust, along with the faint clinking of metal from the distant forge. Evan finally spoke again. "If anyone deserves peace, it's her. But I suppose both of us need to find peace within ourselves first." Jack nodded. "I'm not leaving, but I'm not taking anything either. I'll work. I'll live like a part of this town. If she ever wants to speak, I'll listen. And if she never does, I'll still listen in the wind, in the sand, in all the things we once were." Evan offered his hand. "Then let's keep this town standing, whether the rain comes back or not." Their hands met, rough and worn, but honest. In the days that followed, Dry River began to change. One afternoon, Nora stepped onto her porch and saw the two men working together on the old irrigation ditch. They talked, even laughed softly at one point. In the red glow of the setting sun, they looked like men rebuilding more than just a waterway. They were rebuilding themselves, one stone at a time. Nora felt something lift inside her. She was witnessing something rare. Two men who loved the same woman choosing kindness over bitterness. And then, something unexpected happened. 3 weeks after the prayer service, the sky darkened. A cool wind swept across the valley. The first raindrop hit a tin roof, then another, then hundreds, then thousands. The entire town poured into the streets, shouting, laughing, lifting their hands to the sky as the first rain in years washed the dust from their faces. Jack and Evan stood together at the riverbank. Water began to trickle through the cracks, weaving its way into a thin, glistening stream. Evan looked at Jack, rain soaking through his shirt. "See that? A river never truly dies. It just waits for the right season." Jack nodded. "Same with people." The rain lasted well into the night. When the streets emptied and houses glowed with lamplight, Nora stepped out onto her porch. Mud clung to the road, and the air smelled like life returning. In the rain, she saw Jack walking slowly toward town, hat dripping, shirt plastered to his back. He stopped when he reached her porch, lifting his gaze. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His eyes carried everything he had no right to say out loud: longing, pain, patience, love. Nora felt her breath catch. She gave him the smallest, softest smile. The warm glow from her porch lantern framed both of them. Two people who once lost each other, now standing in the same rain at the same time. The rain had stopped for 3 days, and Dry River, the stream everyone once thought was dead, now shimmered again under the sun. The water was still shallow, but it moved, whispering its way through the sand and the sun-bleached stones. The whole town felt reborn. Folks crowded along the riverbank, letting the cool water run over their fingers and laughing like children. Only Nora sat alone by her window, staring at a stack of blank pages and a half-dried ink pen. Ever since that first drop of rain fell, something else had begun moving inside her too. A current she couldn't hold back anymore, restless and wild. She opened the drawer and pulled out 3 old letters tied with a silver ribbon. She had written them almost 10 years ago, back when she believed Jack Mercer was dead. None of the letters reached him. None were answered. She kept them anyway, like a piece of her soul she could not bury. She opened the first one. The ink had faded, but the words still trembled on the page. Jack, today I buried you. They brought home a man without a face and swore it was you. I did not look long. I was afraid the memory of you would mix with the memory of him. Whoever he was, I lost you that day. Her hand shook as she folded it back. She pulled a fresh sheet and began writing a new letter. Jack, it has been 10 years. You will never know how hard I fought to keep breathing. I stopped crying long ago, but some mornings I woke with no idea what I was living for. Evan saved me, not with love at first, but with kindness. He arrived at the wrong time, but in the right way. When you came back, I thought my heart would break open. Then I realized it was still beating, only beating in fear. Fear that everything good I built would fall apart again. Fear that if I touched you, you would disappear once more. She paused. The curtain stirred with the evening wind. From far off, Evan's hammer rang in the forge, steady and strong, like the heartbeat of the town. She reached for another page and wrote a letter addressed to Evan. Evan, you married a woman who carried someone else's shadow in her heart, and you knew it. Yet for 10 years you never once blamed me. You taught me how to breathe again, how to smile even when I felt empty. When Jack returned, you stayed silent. You were not jealous or angry. You simply told me to be honest with my heart. I do not know how many men can say such a thing and look as gentle as you did. Maybe because you are too good, the pain is doubled. Nora set the pen down and closed her eyes. She could hear the river flowing again, soft and steady, like memory finding its way home. That night she carried the 2 letters to the church. Father Collins was still awake, reading under the warm glow of an oil lamp. I want to confess, Father, Nora whispered. What sin weighs on you, child? I don't know. Maybe the sin of loving too long, or the sin of not knowing how to choose between 2 right things. The priest looked at her with patient kindness. There is no sin in loving, Nora. Sin begins only when love becomes a weapon. But if I choose Jack, Evan will suffer. If I stay with Evan, then I will. Then ask God this. Who deserves peace first, the man you love or you? Nora's tears fell quietly. Father, maybe none of us will have peace. You will, just not today. The next morning, as dawn spread a pale gold across the valley, Nora walked to the riverbank. Mist drifted above the water, and the first light shimmered across the surface. 2 letters lay in her hand. Jack was already there, standing in the wet sand, watching the new water slide around his boots. She walked up and handed him the letters. Read these, then you'll understand. He accepted them silently. When Nora turned to leave, Evan stepped forward from behind the trees. He had arrived earlier and watched everything without a word. Nora froze when she saw him. Evan simply nodded. I know, he said softly. You don't have to explain. Evan, I only want you to hear this. You owe me nothing. If you choose to leave, leave because of love, not because of gratitude. Nora broke down and hugged him. I was lucky to have you. No, Nora, I was the lucky one, even if I only held a part of your heart. She walked away, sunlight catching on her dress as she moved up the road. Jack unfolded her letters and read each line slowly. His eyes blurred, but a faint smile rose through the hurt. Evan stepped beside him. The two men stood quietly, their shadows falling across the shimmering water. "Thank you," Jack said, voice low. "For what?" "For keeping her alive, so she could choose for herself today." Evan looked at the river. "Dry River never truly died, Jack. It was only waiting for rain. I suppose men aren't so different." Jack nodded. Together they watched Nora walking into the sunlit road, her dress swaying softly in the warm summer wind. And down in the valley, people swore the river ran a little stronger, its voice rising like an old song returning. A song about love, mistakes, and the grace of forgiveness. Fall arrived early that year. The air in Dry River softened, losing its harsh edge, and the riverbed, once nothing but cracked earth, now carried a thin ribbon of water that glowed gold in the afternoon sun. Every morning, a light mist hovered over the surface, drifting low like the valley itself was learning how to breathe again after a long exhaustion. And just like the river, the people here seemed to be relearning how to breathe, how to live, how to forgive. Nora moved into the small cabin by the river, the same place Jack had stayed. Evan was the one who suggested it, saying, "The wind is gentler here than in town. She needs a place where she can hear her own heart again." Then he fixed the broken shelf in her old classroom, slung his hammer over his shoulder, and walked back toward the ridge where he had built his new forge. There was no drama, no tears, only the quiet dignity of people who had lived through enough loss to know how to say goodbye with gratitude. For weeks, Jack and Nora lived side by side in silence. In the mornings, he brought coffee to the porch while she read by the window. In the evenings, they walked to the river and watched the water drift by, slow and clear. There were no fiery declarations, no clumsy embraces like the old days, only glances, deep breaths, and the warm certainty that after everything, they were still here. One day, Nora said, "I used to think love was like water. Once it flowed away, it never returned." Jack looked at the river as the sunset turned his eyes a darker brown. "I never believed that. Water doesn't disappear, Nora. It just travels the world and comes back when the ground is soft enough to take it in again." She smiled, soft as a breeze. "Maybe the ground is soft enough now." Jack didn't answer. He simply took her hand, the same hand that had trembled years ago, still warm, still marked with work. They sat like that until night came, listening to crickets in the grass and the gentle tapping of water against the bank, as if Dry River was speaking the words they didn't need to say. One late October afternoon, Father Collins visited. He brought an old Bible and set it on the table. "You two have weathered more storms than most," he said. "God never takes something without giving something else in return. If you want, I can hold a small ceremony. Nothing grand, just among the folks who understand this story." Nora glanced at Jack, then out the window where the river gleamed in the fading light and where Evan walked the dirt road, smiling as he lifted a hand in greeting. "Yes, Father," she said quietly, "but please don't call it a wedding. Call it a Thanksgiving." The ceremony took place the next Sunday morning beneath the oak at the river's edge. Only a handful of neighbors came, along with a few children running barefoot through the grass, and Evan standing toward the back with a gentle smile. Father Collins began with his warm, raspy voice. "There is no such thing as a wasted love, only love that hasn't found its season yet. And when it comes back, even late, it is still a miracle." Jack and Nora didn't exchange rings. They simply held hands. No one cried, but everyone's eyes shone. A breeze stirred the river, and a shimmer ran across the surface like a blessing. Father Collins lifted his hands. "Dry River has water again, and so do your hearts. Live in a way that keeps that water from ever drying out." That afternoon, Jack and Nora sat on the porch as the golden light stretched across the river. She leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "Did you ever think we'd get here?" "No," he answered. "But if a day like this ever came, I knew it'd be quiet, not grand." She nodded. "I thought the same." A sparrow landed on the railing, chirped once, and flew off. They both watched it go, smiling softly. Dry River was no longer the dry river everyone knew. It became a symbol for the town, a reminder that even things that seem lost forever can rise again. And as the sun slipped behind the distant mountains and the last light caught the silver in Jack's hair, Nora squeezed his hand. "Jack," she whispered. "Yes? If I had to choose all over again, I would go through everything, just to reach this day." Jack chuckled, low and warm. "Then I guess every loss had a purpose." Night fell. The new water reflected a young moon. In the distance, the church bell rang. Not sad, not triumphant, but soft, like a blessing for two souls who had walked a long circle to find their way home again. Folks say that from that year on, Dry River never dried up. And whenever someone asked Father Collins if it was a miracle, he simply smiled and said, "There are no miracles. Wherever there is forgiveness, there will always be water." People say love can die. But in Dry River, folks learned something different. Sometimes love only sleeps, like a dry riverbed waiting for the first rain to find its voice again. Jack Mercer and Nora Lane were not two young lovers swept up in passion. They were two people who had been broken, who had lost each other, who had let go of things no one ever expects to get back. Yet somehow they still found their way home. Not by magic, but through kindness, courage, and a quiet belief that if something is true, it will return no matter how late it comes. Dry River has water now, and people still tell this story to their children as a reminder that time may change our faces, but it can never take away what we have loved with our whole hearts. And if tonight, while hearing this story, someone comes to mind, someone you once cared for, or lost, or waited on, then remember this. Somewhere out there, your own river is waiting for its rain too. If this story touched your heart even for a moment, make sure to subscribe to Tales from the Wild West so you won't miss more stories like this. Stories about ordinary lives made extraordinary by love, by hope, and by the quiet strength of the human spirit. Because out here in the West, among the wind, the dust, and the soft gold of evening light, love never truly dies. It simply finds its way back when the season is right.